Are there new ways of organizing society that don't require us to surrender our identity or pledge our allegiance to massive, centralized bureaucracies? Of course there are. But to find them involves challenging our notions of government and state, notions that have circumscribed our political thought for thousands of years. Think about it. For our entire lives, we've been taught to believe that living in a society without government is impossible. Many voters can't even contemplate the idea of opposing both candidate A and candidate B, let alone candidates C through Z. Closing parenthesis. And if you dare mention the idea of not voting at all. But isn't that anarchy? They retort, quavering voices lowered to a whisper lest someone overhear them pronounce such a seditious word. Ah, yes, anarchism. A word soaked in blood and written in flaming red letters in the imagination of the same people who have been conditioned to believe that voting for the next ruler is their noblest and most sacred duty. The commonly held association between anarchy and violence is by no means new. In the 1920s, the fear aroused by the mere word, anarchism, was so strong among Americans and Europeans that anarchist philosopher Alexander Berkman felt he had to respond and allay that fear. In 1929 he published What is Anarchism? Whose chapter 19, Is Anarchism Violence? Addresses the issue head-on. Anarchism is the ideal of such a condition. Of a society without force and compulsion, where all men shall be equals, and live in freedom, peace, and harmony. The word anarchy comes from the Greek, meaning without force, without violence or government, because government is the very fountainhead of violence, constraint, and coercion. Anarchy therefore does not mean disorder and chaos, as you thought before. On the contrary, it is the very reverse of it. It means no government, which is freedom and liberty. Disorder is the child of authority and compulsion. Liberty is the mother of order. 34. This is anarchism from the point of view of an anarchist, a society without compulsion, where order is the natural outgrowth of freedom. Again, to those of us who have been programmed to see government as the fountainhead of law and order, it is almost incomprehensible that order, not to mention peace and harmony, is to be achieved by the dissolution of government. Yet the belief in the need for government, deeply ingrained by the Prussian education system, must be directly challenged. One of the first to contest this indoctrination was Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, the 19th-century French thinker who was the first self-identified anarchist. In his 1851 treatise, General Idea of the Revolution in the 19th Century, Proudhon dismantled the pieties of statist society with breathtaking ferocity. To be governed is to be kept in sight, inspected, spied upon, directed, law-driven, numbered, enrolled, indoctrinated, preached at, controlled, estimated, valued, censured, commanded, by creatures who have neither the right, nor the wisdom, nor the virtue to do so. To be governed is to be at every operation, at every transaction, noted, registered, enrolled, taxed, stamped, measured, numbered, assessed, licensed, authorized, admonished, forbidden, reformed, corrected, punished. It is, under pretext of public utility, and in the name of the general interest, to be placed under contribution, trained, ransomed, exploited, monopolized, extorted, squeezed, mystified, robbed. Then, at the slightest resistance, the first word of complaint, to be repressed, fined, despised, harassed, tracked, abused, clubbed, disarmed, choked, imprisoned, judged, condemned, shot, deported, sacrificed, sold, betrayed. And, to crown all, mocked, ridiculed, derided, outraged, dishonored. That is government. That is its justice. That is its morality. 35. Many of my readers will appreciate the overall sentiment of this Proudhon passage. What, though, of his assertion that these abuses are not just the failing of certain tyrannical governments but are endemic to government itself? Well, that may be a harder pill for my audience to swallow. Nonetheless, it needs to be understood that not just the institution of government but the very concept of it is founded on injustice. Indeed, rooted in the poisonous soil of lies and violence, the fruit of government is itself cursed. American political philosopher Lysander Spooner explained these lies and contradictions in his classic work, No Treason. Woe men have no more natural right to exercise any kind of authority over one than one has to exercise the same authority over two. A man's natural rights are his own against the whole world. And any infringement of them is equally a crime whether committed by one man or by millions. Whether committed by one man calling himself a robber, or by any other name indicating his true character, or by millions calling themselves a government. 36. The issue, then, is not whether the government of this or that country is likely to treat its subjects any better or worse than another country's government is, but whether these subjects are really subjects in the first place. How, after all, did governments come into existence? Where did their authority over the land within the arbitrarily defined borders originate? What right does a government have to rule over its people, and what makes its people beholden to its laws? The obvious truth, of course, is that no would-be ruler, whether a single monarch or a handful of plutocrats or a military junta or a parliament or even one's next-door neighbor, has any intrinsic authority to rule over another human. This principle has been presented and proven by many writers, activists, and thinkers over the centuries. Spooner, for example, writing No Treason nearly 2 centuries ago, carefully dismantled all the usual arguments for the authority of the U.S. Constitution over the citizens of the U.S. government. A more contemporary writer making the same argument in equally clear, candid, compelling prose is Larken Rose, noted anarchist and author of the book, The Most Dangerous Superstition. In his essay, My Deprogramming, Rose brilliantly articulates his thoughts on the illegitimate nature of government and its presumed authority over the people. By trying to reconcile contradictions in my own political beliefs, I proved to myself that government can never be legitimate. It can never have authority. However necessary it supposedly is, and however noble the stated goal might be, I eventually realized that it is utterly impossible for anyone to acquire the right to rule others, even in a limited, constitutional way. There are several ways to prove this, and each of them is astonishingly simple. For example, if a person cannot delegate a right he doesn't have, then it is impossible for those in government to have any rights that I do not personally have. Where and how would they have acquired such superhuman rights? Furthermore, unless human beings can actually alter morality by mere decree, then all legislation is pointless and illegitimate. If one accepts the principle of non-aggression, then government is logically impossible, because a government without the right to tax, regulate, or legislate, which are all threats of aggression, is no government at all. 37. If one agrees with Rose's logic, then one is led to undertake a mission. No, not the mission so often promoted in our schools, echoed by our media, and propounded by our politicians of going to the ballot box and voting in better rulers. And not the mission so often endorsed by mob leaders and rabble-rousers of opening the ammo box to threaten the violent overthrow of the government. Rather, the mission of getting on a soapbox and inspiring a revolution of consciousness. A paradigm shift in our thinking about government is what is needed. The masses must discover that they are not subjects or citizens at all, but free human beings under no obligation whatsoever to follow the dictates of any governmental structure. It is only by raising awareness of the problem of political authority that we can hope to help the people discover this long-suppressed truth. As Rose puts it, so now I spend much of my time trying to persuade others to give up the cult of statism. I do not advocate abolishing government any more than I advocate abolishing Santa Claus. I just want people to stop letting their perceptions and actions be so profoundly warped and perverted by something that does not exist, and never did. That is why I refer to the belief in government and authority as the most dangerous superstition. If people could give up that superstition, even if they did not otherwise become any more wise or compassionate, the state of society would drastically improve. I don't pretend to have the ability to make anyone more virtuous, but by pointing out to them the contradictions in their own belief systems, the very same contradictions I struggled with for years, I hope to help some of them reclaim ownership of themselves, so they can start thinking and acting as rational, sentient beings, instead of as the well-trained livestock of malicious masters. 38. At last, we discover the root of the problem. The real bugbear is not government, after all, but our belief in the authority of whatever gang of criminals wears the mantle of government official. The hypocrisy that this belief gives rise to is galling. We rightly call an unelected man delusional if he believes his own dictates to be laws, yet we dutifully obey the dictates of our legislators. Why? We rightly castigate a common thief for stealing someone's money, yet we laud the thieves who call themselves our government, and call their robbery taxation. Why? We rightly lock up a murderer who takes another's life, yet we praise a murderer dressed in uniform as a hero for spilling the blood of our government's enemies. Why? Unravel the thread of this imaginary authority and you unravel the thread of statism, the belief that immoral actions can be made moral simply because they are committed in the name of the state. According to the statists' twisted logic, people are inherently wicked and deceitful, so some of those wicked and deceitful people should become rulers so they can stop the others from being wicked and deceitful. By extension, since people tend to rob and kill others, some of those people should be authorized to rob and kill in order to stop the others from robbing and killing each other. Contrast that muddied thinking with this lucid remark by American author Edward Abbey. Anarchism is founded on the observation that since few men are wise enough to rule themselves, even fewer are wise enough to rule others. 39. Which brings us back to the beginning. The contention that any individual or group of individuals has a legitimately granted authority to govern any other individual against his will is a delusion, and a dangerous one at that. Thus, the notion that voting for candidate B simply because the way he proposes to rule over you is more palatable than candidate A's plan for ruling over you fundamentally misses the point. Even in the best-case scenario, where you vote for candidate B and he actually gets into office, you are still a slave. The fact that you willingly put the chains around your own neck does not change the nature of the relationship. In Spooner's words, the principle that the majority have a right to rule the minority practically resolves all government into a mere contest between two bodies of men, as to which of them shall be masters and which of them slaves, a contest that, however bloody, can never, in the nature of things, be finally closed so long as man refuses to be a slave. 40. Here, Spooner has pinpointed the underlying purpose of all elections, to pick who will be masters and who will be slaves. Now, we can see why the ultimate power of the individual lies in refusing to be a slave and, equally, in refusing to accept the premise that electing a kinder master will stop the abuse inherent in that relationship. Hence, voting for candidate B is not the solution. Our true power lies in not complying with the dictates of any would-be authority. The best possible election, then, would be the one in which no one voted. In the end, it should insult us no less if the NSA's foiled terror plot map showed only the 50 states of the Union as the homeland. For, no matter how any political boundaries are drawn, no matter how far north or south or east or west they stretch, political boundaries merely reinforce the age-old belief in statism that constitutes the rotten core of both nationalism and globalism. It is only in the rejection of this dangerous superstition that we can truly defeat the real threats to humanity, the globalist ideology that is being foisted upon us and the nationalist ideology that undergirds it. Note: